12th grade year was a very memorable year for me. And I say that because I went to Archbishop Carroll High School, and my 12th grade year of high school, I was coming into my own, learning who I was, what I liked, learning my passions, the things that drive me, and all of that kind of wonderful thing. And 12th grade year, I was in a creative writing class, and I was always writing poetry, but it was in my creative writing class where I began to get my own style of poetry. I learned the kind of writer that I was. And I was in a creative writing class, and it was taught by Mr. Joseph Ross, one of my favorite teachers from high school. And this particular time, he gave us an assignment, and that assignment was to write a poem in the voice of somebody else. And so I thought that how cool or interesting it would be rather to write a poem in the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. From the time he was struck with the bullet until the time he took his last breath. What would be the thoughts that would be running through his mind? And so in order to write that poem with accuracy, I had to do research. I had to do research about the events around the assassination, who was there, who wasn't there, the intricate details. And so that kind of led me to a rabbit hole into learning more about Dr. Martin Luther King. I learned more about him as a human being, as the person, his imperfections, and the things that made him who he was. I wanted to know more about him, not just the speaker and the orator, but I wanted to know him as the father, the husband, the dad, the preacher, the son, the nephew, and the grandchild of these descendants of wonderful Baptist preachers. And so it was during that assignment to where I began to get fascinated with Dr. King, the human. He became human to me, and so I was learning about the assassination. And so I wrote this poem called 306 Lorraine Motel, and that poem is in his voice. I wrote the poem, and then my class, they loved the poem, and then I had the opportunity of saying the poem that February in a Black History event that we had at my school. And when I read the poem in front of people, it was a crowd full of people. You had people that were in their 60s and 70s at the time, and the oohs and the ahs and the groanies and the and so they loved the poem. I ended up sending the poem to the National Civil Rights Museum, which is the Lorraine Motel that is turned into a museum. And surprisingly, they wrote back, I believe, like a week or two after I sent them the letter, saying that they loved the letter, they appreciated the letter, and they were going to keep it on file and contact me if they wanted to do anything with this poem. And so that started Dr. King's assassination. And Dr. King was the very reason why I went to undergrad for criminal justice, because it just didn't make sense. I wanted to find out who exactly killed him, who was involved. And so that kind of spearheaded me going into school for criminal justice, and why I'm working in the field that I work in now. And so, Dr. King, he's very much so an inspiration to me. Many people know only the I Have a Dream speech and the Mountaintop speech, but my love for Dr. King goes far beyond that. And so it was always a big deal to me that for the last 10, 11 years of my life, I wanted to be able to go to Memphis to see the Lorraine Motel, and I wanted to go to Montgomery, Alabama, to see Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, and I also wanted to go to Atlanta to see Ebenezer, to visit, to see the birth home. And so, I always knew that those were pilgrimages that I wanted to make. And so, needless to say, this particular poem, along with many other poems that I wrote in high school, I put it in my first book that I published when I was 21 years of age, called From Pain to Poetic Justice, Reflections in Poetry. And that poem, 306 Lorraine Motel, is definitely one of my favorite pieces, one of my favorite poems. And so, it's monumental for me as I think back and look at it and reflect, but it's definitely one for the books. Yeah. As I step foot onto this balcony, I greet everyone standing beside and below me. Last night I gave a speech that was a part of my cleansing. But little did I know, within the next few minutes, I would enter another dimension. It's kind of cold out, Doc. You should go back in and grab an overcoat. I tilt my head up to feel a breeze unlike no other. It felt like the breath of death coming to claim my temple. Before I could step back into my King Abernathy suite, a bullet pierces my jaw, travels down through my spinal cord, knocking me off my feet. I lay tranquilized on the ground as my blood becomes acquainted with the rusty concrete on the balcony. I look over to my right and see my good friend, Reverend Ralph Abernathy. He puts a towel over my face and to stop the blood from flowing. Martin, it's Ralph. Everything's going to be okay. But I realized April 4th, 1968 would be my transition day. As I lay on my rugged soiled deathbed that is contaminated with the footsteps of rats and roaches, I see a quick slideshow of the life I live. From the precious moments with Yoki, Bernice, Dexter, and Marty, to the sentimental moments with Coretta, my living is not in vain. From Montgomery to Memphis, from the drum major to I Have a Dream, from the Ku Klux Klan to the SCLC, my living is not in vain. From John F. Kennedy to Medgar Evers, no greater love than one who will lay down his life for a friend. No, my living is not in vain. I soak every last moment of life with pride, even though I can't respond when they call my name. My voice taken by the impact of hatred, jealousy, and envy, all in one vicious bullet. I strain and mumble the shattered words of my favorite melody. Precious Lord, take my hand. Lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. I end this phase of life, slipped away into the bosom of Jesus Christ. As my devoured physical shell remains, others hope it will be saved from an already declared unconscious sleep. My blood leaves a smeared writing on the concrete that says, Martin Luther King Jr. was here, 1929 through 1968. Rest in peace. Hey, what's happening? This is Deontay Carroll, host of Turn Up the Volume podcast. And listen, I want to let y'all know something. You can follow us on many different platforms. You can follow me on Facebook at Deontay J. Carroll Sr. You can also follow me on Twitter at Deontay J. Carroll, no apostrophe. Also, I'm on Instagram at Deontay Carroll, all one word, no apostrophe. And lastly, you want to follow me on YouTube at Deontay Carroll, because I post all of my episodes and post all of my shows from the podcast on my YouTube page. So if you want to continue to stay connected, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and follow me on all of my social media platforms. And remember, until next time, keep that volume turned up. Peace. Be blessed.